Okay, we're continuing with the quotes by Ayn Rand. I think this is like part 6 or something. So when she talks about naturalism, remember naturalism was the style of the modern age coming out after World War I, where people would just write about situations without necessarily having a hero. They'd often have an anti-hero or some lowlife. So Ayn Rand hates that type of literature. I do as well. She said depth of writing in literature, a novel of naturalism style, is like the depth of a garbage can. Naturalism is evil, whereas she loves a heroic, intelligent, individualistic man doing good things, overcoming obstacles. I agree. Ayn Rand says a novelist is a storyteller. The choice of subject is the most important thing in literature. The story, the theme, the plot, the characters. There is a difference between aesthetic incompetence, like that of an artist who is too young to present something well, and aesthetic crime, meaning a bad choice of subject with a naturalistic method. That's why all the modern stuff stinks. That's why there's no point in watching anything from Hollywood nowadays, because Hollywood is fundamentally evil. It's been taken over by Satanism, and so anything they produce, it's always bad, because they don't have a good philosophy. Okay, there was tons of good stuff came out of Hollywood back in the 1950s, 1960s, 1970s, 1980s. And then in the 90s, it started going down, down, down to the point where nowadays it's evil, from top to bottom. Okay, Ayn Rand said that a writer should be like a prospector and a craftsman. Like a prospector, he tries to find gems to write about. Then, like a craftsman, he tries to fashion the gems into a beautiful crown worthy of contemplation. Okay, Ayn Rand on her philosophy of writing. I am a romantic in the sense that I present men as they ought to be. I am a realist in the sense that I place them in the here and now, on this earth. Romantic literary style depends on a certain kind of philosophy, a philosophy of integration. Art is the concretization of metaphysics. Art is a role model builder. It thus is a fuel for the soul. To those who reject art as an escape, if it is an improvement on the known, it is an escape. Well, then agriculture is an escape from hunger, and knowledge is an escape from ignorance, and life is an escape from death. Then I am an escapist. So was Aristotle, and so was Christopher Columbus. She loves Christopher Columbus and Aristotle, okay? Because they're heroic, great men that did something that opened up a new vista for everybody else to enjoy, okay? To benefit from. Okay, now here's a quote from another guy by the name of John Senior, and he's talking about the death of Christian culture. So here's what he says. The neoclassicists, now that would be like in the 1700s, like the so-called Enlightenment, all those jerk-offs like Voltaire, Diderot, Rousseau, okay? The neoclassicists believed that significance derived from reason. The Romantics attacked them, that's Romanticism, early 1800s, declaring that significance derived from the affections. The modernists attack both, repudiating both reason and affection, repudiating the idea of significance itself. Neoclassicism ennui followed a failure of reason. Romantic ennui followed a failure of affection. But in modernism, ennui is integral to both of it. So what I'm sort of saying here is, this is why Christianity writes the best literature, because you have the sense that everything is meaningful. The neoclassicists, the so-called Enlightenment of the 1700s, they're a bunch of jerks. You're not going to have mankind be happy and get along without Christianity. It's just a fact. What did it lead to? Diderot and Voltaire and Rousseau. It led to, the disaster in France, 1789 to 1794. It led to the guillotine and Robespierre, okay? And then Romanticism was a reaction against all that. And it did have a little bit of a throwback to Christianity, but not enough, okay? And there was a craziness of, people like Percy Bysshe Shelley and Lord Byron. Modernism is just worthless, okay? Okay, so now we're going to talk a little bit, it's a couple quotes here. I don't even know where this one comes from. Socrates was a concretization of Plato's philosophy. Jesus and the saints are the concretization of Christianity. Okay, now I'm going to give you a quote from, this is Leonard Peikoff. He was a scholar, student of Ayn Rand. She actually gave her her death inheritance to Leonard Peikoff. Her real husband had already died. Okay. He says, Leonard Peikoff, he says, the romantic movement of the 1800s, this was one last quote from Ayn Rand. The romantic movement of the 1800s is the greatest literature because it emphasizes man's ability to choose a path in his own life, his volition based on reason. Okay, now here's Peikoff quote. Art, in Ayn Rand's definition, is a selective recreation of reality, according to the artist's metaphysical value judgments. The result is a universe in a microcosm, thus broadcasting to the viewer or reader, this is what counts in life, as I, the artist, see life. The artist is the closest man comes to being God. We can validly speak of the world of Michelangelo, of Van Gogh, of Dostoevsky. Okay, so what's being said here is actually very important. What Ayn Rand is saying is she's echoing Aristotle, saying that literature is more important than history because it gives man a sense of what is right, how they should live their life on this planet. And that's a valuable thing, okay? Because, a young guy, you don't know what is good. Somebody grows up in our modern culture, all they see around them is degradation and disgusting filth. And so then to see something beautiful like a novel by Victor Hugo and Dostoevsky, they're like, wow, life can really be that good, that wonderful, that great. I shall aspire and try to live like that, to be like that. I want to be like Alyosha, okay? I want to be like Jean Valjean. I want to write like Hugo or Dostoevsky. That's a great thing. To paint like Michelangelo, to think like Isaac Newton. Okay. Ayn Rand. The artist isolates the things which he regards as metaphysically essential and then integrates them into a single new concrete that represents an embodied abstraction. Okay. And kind of one of the points they're making here is you can't have Christianity without Christ. Okay. You can't have Greek philosophy without Socrates. Socrates is the embodiment of Greek philosophy, as are Plato in his own way, and then Aristotle even more, okay? But you need the person. If you just read it without the person or don't have the person, the story of the person there, it's hard to put it all together. Okay, so here is the next quote, is another one from Leonard Peikoff summarizing the work of Ayn Rand. He says, ethics is a complexity of broad abstractions. One must be able to summon into focus the consciousness of the image of a man in order to follow such a code. This involves a process of objectification. It requires a specific person. The crucial importance on a purely philosophical level of fictional heroes like Howard Rourke, okay, and of John Galt. Without such projections, the objectivist theory of ethics, however well presented, could not clearly be grasped by a man, just as the Christian code would be vague and floating apart from the stories of Jesus and the saints. Yeah, if you're going to teach Christianity, you need Jesus and the saints. You can't teach it without them, okay? And this kind of reminds me of a quote by Will Durant, talking about how the average man wants religion. Voltaire had said, a philosopher doesn't need God, but the average man's not a philosopher. And, Will Durant said, in order to have a society where people are well behaved and nice to each other, you need, philosophy. You need religion. And in order for them to understand morals, they need to learn them as a child in the context of religion, taught with Christ. Otherwise, you just end up with barbarism, okay? And that's what we're drifting back into. Okay, so Leonard Peikoff, an ethical treatise alone does not give man the moral guidance he needs, nor does the image of the hero alone, but the union of the two does give it. Art, Miss Rand concludes, is the indispensable medium for the communication of a moral ideal. And that's why she's right. And this is important in the sense that you'll hear politicians and other scumbags saying, oh, we should just teach technical skills in college. We don't need the liberal arts anymore. Wrong. They want a bunch of automatons, conformists who just obey. If you're going to produce intelligent, creative people, you need this type of stuff more than you need the other science. You can teach yourself stuff in science pretty fast most of the time, versus you have to build this foundation. The sooner the better. And if you don't build it into young people, it's harder for people to get it later on their own. So the arts are very important. Reading and literature and stories and culture, all that stuff's really important. Like reading the Bible, the ancient Greek myths, all that stuff's real important. Anyways, I hope you found this helpful.